All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being here with me today. I'm your host, Nolan. We got a lot to cover today, lots to get into. If you were paying attention to election results rolling in last night as I was, then you would also know that the Republican Party got trounced in every single election nationwide last night, whether it be New Jersey or Virginia, or where we're going to focus on today, which is New York City. And the Republicans and the conservative establishment are failing to understand how Zohran Mamdani got such a resounding win in New York. They're completely missing the point. They would tell you, if you go on Fox News right now, that this was an Islamic jihadist uprising in New York, that this was a radical uprising of this Hamas-supporting jihadist. And they will fearmonger you into thinking that's what happened. That's not what happened, and they're intentionally lying to you. They're missing the point. That's not what happened. What happened was an economic uprising, and it's a very dangerous one, because if you're like me, who's someone who despises socialism, if you're like me, a capitalist who wants to see capitalism actually flourish in the real sense in this country, then you need to pay attention to what's going on. Because what's going on is a misrepresentation of capitalism. Our economy that's being carried out in the name of capitalism by our Republican politicians and our Democrat politicians is a complete crony, corrupt system that is being carried out in the name of capitalism. You're told it's capitalism when it's not. And that is the system that results in Zohran Mamdani winning. Because that turns people against capitalism, when in reality it's anything but capitalism. So we'll get into all this today and more on the Quest for Clarity podcast.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve system.
Only America first.
End all of these wars. America is trying to play empire. We want everything released. And you're actively covering it up. It's not America first to be pushing our influence in areas where it shouldn't be. We're run by people that don't understand what they're doing and don't understand the ramifications of the policies they're enacting. That's an incredibly dangerous situation. All right, everybody, before we begin, if you wouldn't mind going right down below this video and hitting like and subscribe, I really appreciate that a lot. If you also wouldn't mind going to my Instagram, X, and Spotify accounts and giving all those a follow, I'd really appreciate that as well. Let's get into the news of the day. So, if you were paying attention last night about the New Jersey elections, the Virginia elections, both governor's elections, and the mayoral race in New York, then you would know it was a progressive wave, a Democrat blue tsunami last night across the country. And there are lots of reasons for this. We won't necessarily get into too much detail about Virginia and New Jersey because though every election was slightly different, has slightly different reasons for occurring. And a lot of it had to do with mediocre Republican candidates, as it usually seems to be. But New York City is different. There is a different scenario in New York that Republicans are missing. If you turn on Fox News right now, after this win of Zohran Mamdani, then you would be convinced that there was some Islamic uprising in New York, some jihad. New York has officially globalized the Intifada or something. That's what they would convince you of. They'd convince you that you are now in danger of being publicly executed or something. This is the fear-mongering. And the problem isn't that people are upset Mamdani won. I'm upset Mamdani won. It's a problem that they're upset about it for the wrong reasons. The reason to be upset that Zohran Mamdani won is because the Republican Party and conservatism has failed. And there's a couple of reasons why. They have failed economically. They have failed in terms of housing. And they failed in terms of inflation and spending. The Conservative Party used to represent capitalism. They used to represent free markets, innovation, capitalism, and fiscal responsibility in our government. And if that was actually the case, we'd have a prosperous society. What our Republican politicians instead have chosen to do for generations, and it has been never been worse than right now, is our Republican politicians, in the name of capitalism, while professing capitalism, participate in cronyism and corporatism. What they like to do, while saying that they're capitalist, is print endless amounts of money to funnel to their foreign or domestic interests, whether it be in Israel and Ukraine, or to their donors here in America of many different industries, through subsidies. That's what they do. And then when people complain about it, they say that you're complaining about the capitalist system and you're some Marxist. That's not the case. There's a difference between capitalism in its purest sense, free markets in its purest sense, and cronyism and corporatism. Republicans and conservatives right now engage in corporatism while professing capitalism, and they conflate the two intentionally. And right now, young people are very disillusioned with capitalism for that reason. It's not because capitalism as a system is a failure, because it's not. We've seen it work. We know it works. It's the most rational form of economics ever invented by man. But what the problem is right now, that America is not a capitalist system. Right now, the government is a corporatist system that, through their cahoots with all of their big donors in tech, in arms manufacturing, in oil, whatever you name it, they funnel money, they print endless money, causing inflation, and they funnel that money to their donors. And that money goes back into the economy, as we've said time and time again here on this show, and causes inflation. It's very simple. And that inflation causes the rise in housing, it causes the rise in gas, it causes the rise in rents, it causes the rise in everything. Healthcare, food, everything you can think of. It causes a rise in prices, naturally. And Republicans tend to bully and tend to talk down to the voters. And they see young people right now who are struggling in this economy, who are $200,000 in debt from college, can't afford houses, can't afford groceries, and they get radicalized into being for Zohran Mamdani because he says, we're going to help you guys out. They see that voter, and they talk down to that voter. You had Ben Shapiro last night on CNN saying that young people are entitled, spoiled brats. They just want free stuff. This is like a third-grade election. No, not all of them. That's not the case for the majority of young people. The majority of young people would be very happy to get a real chance in this economy. They'd be very happy if we were in an actual capitalist system and we weren't dealing with fiat currency where the money means nothing. Their money is every single year getting less and less valuable, and they can't buy a house. Young people would be very happy with that because it's natural. Capitalism is the most natural human economic system. What they're not happy with is the rising prices. And instead of Republican politicians running on fiscal sanity, they prioritize ratcheting up the spending every year to fund war over there and fund subsidies for that corporation, and ignore the fact that that causes the rising prices that young people complain about. And then when the young people complain about it, they instead go and lecture them about how entitled they are. This is the problem. This is why Republican politicians get such a bad look. This is why young people despise the Republican politicians, like Mike Johnson or Ted Cruz, who lecture them every day about how socialism's evil and capitalism's the way to go, while at the very same time embracing socialist policies in the name of capitalism in the federal government. Republican politicians, quite literally, while lecturing about capitalism and lecturing about how evil socialism is, engage in the socialist policy of taking your money through taxes and then giving it to corporations through subsidies. And they have the nerve to tell the young people that they're entitled for complaining about the system that they call capitalism. If Republican politicians want to be honest, then they'll acknowledge that the system isn't capitalist. But they won't, because for the base, capitalism is the word that they like. That's the buzzword. So they know if they call anything capitalist, then the whole base will get behind them. But the reality is the Republican politicians don't engage in capitalism. And I think Charlie Kirk, a couple months back on Tucker Carlson's show, said it best. Take a look.
All I'm saying is I am here as a messenger of the next generation. I'm telling you, this is bad. This generation can't own anything. They owe so much more money than generations prior. This is the most indebted generation in history. And I double checked that. Gen Z owes the most money in any history, any generation in history. So we wonder why then all of a sudden, hey, you want to go buy a home now at the age of 38, your credit score is destroyed. Your spending habits are terrible. You don't want to save and you don't think you should save. And you know what I hear from some of them is they say, well, why should I save when what I saw around me is that you need to get into this economy and spend because the savers got wrecked in 2008.
Why is the right participating in basically a cover-up of a crime against people?
Or even like from my perspective, why is the right so blind to the suffering of the young people that just gave you a Senate majority?
Oh, fair. Good question.
Donald Trump built this movement of younger voters that galvanized the nation. Again, this is the untold story of the 2024 election is how Donald Trump won the youth vote in so many parts of the country. Okay, so what are they experiencing? They own nothing. They're renting constantly. And they're involved in this scam of a credit-based economy. Everything is based on credit. And so then what it does is it deteriorates your capacity to have equity. And so, again, I'm not here to propose like a solution of all these different policy requirements. All I'm saying is, how about some national attention for this? How
Well,
about
there's going to
can
be
we have a conversation about it?
there's going to be a policy solution imposed on the rest of us, which is just stealing your stuff.
Well, that's the thing. So that's what this is where the continuum, whatever you want to call it, the spectrum, whatever DC term, we're here in kind of, again, I am a market guy. I like private property.
I agree.
I like trading. I
I'm
like
with you.
when I meet someone good at their craft and they're a carpenter or they're a small business owner. I actually want to save markets. And if we don't do something about this, you're going to get a Venezuelan-style youth-led revolt.
Exactly right.
And I am not exaggerating. Political radicalism needs a catalyst. Political radicalism does not come out of peace, prosperity, rising wages, stable families, church attendance, and happy people. Happy people, grateful people do not get behind Vladimir Lenin, and they certainly don't get behind Chavez or Castro.
That's right.
People that own nothing, that feel like their property is diminishing, or they don't have property, or their dollar is diminishing in value, they start to look for alternatives.
He's completely correct, obviously. And the shame of it is that the young people are turning to socialism instead of capitalism. The purest, the correct answer to this, of course, as it always is liberty, libertarian economics. That's the answer to these problems. If you've read economics in one lesson, if you've read The Road to Serfdom, if you've read these books, you would know the answer to this is libertarian economics, more freedom, more free markets. But that's not what we have right now. And instead, we have a corporate, corrupt system that is private-public's mashup right now. The federal government is entangled in all of these industries and are doing so in the name of capitalism when it's not capitalism. So this is a failure of every Republican congressman, every Republican senator that's out here lecturing about capitalism while not even being capitalist. It's craziness. And then they have the nerve to lecture the young people. And just let's focus in. This is very important. What Charlie Kirk said is completely correct. That it cannot be overstated, the economic treachery that it is to be a Generation Z person in this country right now. You're told since birth to go to college and get your $200,000 degree. You come out of college, you can't find the job, and then the housing prices are now $1 million plus on average in some cities, because of the radical spending that our politicians have spent on foreign wars and subsidies for their donors. They're more concerned with ratcheting up the spending at the Federal Reserve to fund this war over there or this war over there. We're talking about going into Venezuela right now. We can't do that by taxing the people. We can't do that by borrowing the money. We're doing that by printing the money, which causes inflation. We're prioritizing overthrowing Maduro over keeping our dollars in America sound. This is madness. And then when you say anything about it, you're called a Marxist. You're called some socialist. When in reality, it's the most gaslighting thing ever, because in reality, people like me who are saying this stuff are the purest capitalists, actually. And the people who lecture them, all these politicians, are the socialists, actually, because they're the ones taking your money and shoving it down the corporate interests. So they can save it. And stop lecturing the young people. You have some empathy. Enough of this pull yourself up by your... How about you guys start getting things right? Stop lecturing the young people because you have no leg to stand on. It's enraging when you hear someone say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Okay, how about you stop spending insane amounts of money and destroying my currency and causing housing prices to rise? How about that? Do you have any responsibility for this at all? You're actually... Just so you know, the people who say that, they're actually the ones in power right now who can make a difference. They're the ones who could say no to reckless spending. They're the ones who are in the seats of power. And they're the ones who have the nerve to tell the powerless people, the ones who are just everyday citizens, they're the ones who have the nerve to lecture them that it's actually on them. No, at some point it is on the politicians, like Thomas Massey, thankfully, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, the sane politicians, to say no to the reckless spending because it's killing the country. And nobody wants to say that, but it's true. Nobody wants to face that basic fact that is destroying the currency. And our politicians are more focused on wars abroad than the money at home. That's the truth. And they all say you're a Marxist, you're a socialist for saying that. No, I just want to prioritize this country and the young people in this country and in my generation over the foreign wars in Israel. Like, is that too much to ask? In 2026 and in 2028, if the Republican politicians don't get a grip and start talking about the real issues, and start focusing on housing and economics, and reclaim the name of capitalism from the socialists who've mischaracterized it, if we don't get politicians in the Republican Party who are actually capitalist, actually for free markets, and in the truest sense, America first, then the Republican Party is going to die because the young people are turning away from cronyism. And they're either going to go for free markets and libertarian economics, or they're going to go for socialism. And the Republican Party is falling flat on this, and it's a shame. But it's all their fault. It's all they're doing. Don't blame the voters for going with what sounds better. Campaign better and be better when you win. When the young people voted for Donald Trump to catch a break on the economy last year, they voted for Donald Trump in a majority last year because of the inflation. How about you cut them some slack and stop the spending? It's too much to ask, isn't it? How about you stop the spending? This is the real problem. Acknowledge the real problems in the economy and fix it. Stop the spending. It's not that much to ask. Fiscal sanity. What happened to the fiscal conservatives? They're not very fiscally conservative at all. So it's ridiculous. This is the exact reason Zohran Mamdani won, and he's going to be very bad for New York. But Republicans need to capitalize on their opportunities when they have them, because it's this. If you're not going to reach the young people, they're going to go for the socialists. Because if you look around right now in this economy, that's just, if you're living in reality, it's very easy to see. And while we're at it, we will debunk some of Zohran Mamdani's crazy economic theories, because they have to be debunked, because it's just true. Zohran Mamdani blames the greedy landlords and the greedy corporations and the rich for all the problems of the world, when in reality, it's not that. The government is the problem. And it's really a shame that the Republicans have no leg to stand on this, because it's the truth. And the Democrats for sure can't say a thing about this because they're just as guilty, but the Republicans are also guilty of this. But they've dug themselves such a hole that they can't acknowledge the reality. The reality is why housing is going up, why food is going up, why the price of all these things are rising and have been rising really since COVID, but really since the creation of the Federal Reserve, but really in a crazy rate since COVID. The reason that the rich and poor gap is growing exponentially after COVID is because of the radical spending that our government enacts through the Federal Reserve, the printing of money that inflates the currency. It's very natural. I say it over and over and over again, not to be repetitive, but to just ingrain it in everyone's mind, because it's true. It's really that simple. I mean, at least Zohran Mamdani sees the problem for all of his false prescriptions and all of his false solutions. At least he sees the problem with this current system. The Republicans intentionally choose to cover their eyes and ears and just ignore what's going on around them, ignore the wealth gap that's grown from the rich and the poor. They choose to ignore that, even though it is reality, where even if just because you're a libertarian capitalist doesn't mean that you can't acknowledge reality in front of you. And the reason for it is because of the government. And they can't acknowledge that. And then when the young people acknowledge it, when the young people come out of college with $200,000 of debt and say, hey, I can't buy a home like I was told I would be able to, the Republicans get into lecture mode and say, you're entitled, you're a brat, you're spoiled. Gen Z's the most spoiled generation ever. Blah, 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 blah. This is what they do. This is the repeated pattern. And they don't understand the reason that they won the majority Gen Z vote in 2024. They don't get it. It didn't stick to them. The reason they did is because Donald Trump was talking about affordability. Because Biden and Harris ratcheted up the spending and it caused inflation, which caused price to rise naturally. This is natural in economics. That prices rise when the currency is inflated. And Trump capitalized on that election. He talked about affordability and the young people voted for him. And now Zohran Mamdani talks about affordability because the Republicans that got power in office didn't do a thing about it. And so he won. It's really that simple. And the Republicans are choosing to ignore this. And it's really ridiculous. And it's time for the Republican Party to wake up. Be like Thomas Massie, be like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and listen to the voters. The voters are very loud. They're very vocal. And they let you know when something is wrong. There's no shortage of voters saying something is wrong here. And Marjorie Taylor Greene acknowledges that. Thomas Massie acknowledges that. But for some reason, Mike Johnson and Donald Trump, none of these people want to acknowledge that. It's the truth. You see speeches today saying, oh, grocery prices are down, housing prices are down. No, they aren't. That's not factual. Then how would you explain Zohran Mamdani winning then? If everything's so great, why would they turn to radicalism? Because they're just naturally socialists? No, that's ridiculous. It's because things aren't great right now, and they're looking for a radical response to that being not great. They're looking for a solution. And for all Mamdani's faults, at least he's offering them something that they're trying to believe in. So it's time for the Republicans in D.C. to wake up and smell the roses, get out of their bubble in D.C. around their donors and their special interests that tell them everything's going so great, because it's going great for them. It's not going great for everybody else right now. That's the reality that they refuse to acknowledge. And they do so because if they actually acknowledged it, it might require them to change up their donation tactics a bit. They might not want to take donations from the foreign interests and the domestic interests that require the endless printing of money to get their subsidies that they want in return for their donation. It might require them to change up a little bit, but they don't want to do that. So instead, they intentionally ignore the complaints of the many across the country, the many people across the country that are feeling economic pain right now. And instead of the Republicans reacting to that in a sane way by saying, okay, well, let's actually embrace capitalism like we say we do. No, they let it fester, they let it grow, and they let it morph into a socialist revolution in New York City. It wasn't an Islamic jihadist revolution in New York. It was a socialist revolution in New York. The majority of the voters voted for a socialist. If something's not wrong, if you're not understanding something is wrong with the messaging, and your only response is to blame the voters as jihadists, that's on you. And get ready for 2026 because it's going to be brutal. It's a rude awakening. If all you've got is complaining that they're jihadists and they're anti-Israel, that's your messaging. And it's clear that you're not even focused on America. You're focused on what he says about Israel. Then it's going to be a rude awakening in 2026 because Mamdani's his most viral clip in the debate, in the New York City primary debate, his most viral clip was where he said, no, I'm not going to go to Israel. I'm going to stay in New York. America first, the broad idea of America first, of prioritizing the people of this country, is popular. Now, we have different ways of doing that. Mamdani wants to do it through socialism, which is stupid. But people like me want to do it by not shelling out money to all these foreign interests and these corporate interests that donate to our politicians. We want the American people to keep their money. We want to tax them less so that they can invest it into their own life. And then we want to spend less so that the currency isn't radically devalued. That's what we want to do. But America first, in a broad sense, the idea of prioritizing the people of this country, America first and authenticity in the face of a corporate stooge like Andrew Cuomo, those two factors pushed Mamdani over the edge. And if the Republicans choose to ignore that, they do that at their own peril. So that's where we'll leave it off for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Also, please be sure to go to my Instagram, X, and Spotify accounts and give all those a follow. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a good day.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve System.
Only America first.